Welcome to Only Joe, where today it's Stephen King, ancient bunkers, and very modern paranoia. This episode has everything. A farmer finds an underground city because of a runaway chicken. Stephen King invents a fake author because even he thought there was too much Stephen King. And Tim Robbins is out here saying the machines, the media, and the billionaires are all very much in the room. Stephen King using the name Richard Bachman is such a perfectly blunt publishing story. He wanted to put out more books, but there was this fear the market would get saturated, and the attitude was basically, we can't keep selling these fucking Stephen King books. Imagine being so successful that your problem is there is simply too much of you for capitalism to process. And then there's the other very Stephen King detail, which is that during one of his cocaine-flooded periods, he threw away a manuscript that his wife literally rescued from the trash. That discarded manuscript later became a classic, which is inspiring and also a terrible lesson for anyone with a messy office. Now, for one of the greatest accidental discoveries ever. In 1963, a farmer in Turkey is chasing a lost chicken, finds an opening, and that leads to Derinkuyu, this enormous underground city cut deep into the earth. We're talking 18 levels, around 85 meters down, and room for something like 20,000 people. It had grain storage, wine presses, chapels, ventilation shafts, and these giant stone doors that roll shut from the inside, which is a very strong sign that the neighbors were not chill. Whether they built it to hide from invading armies or from some environmental nightmare, the place says one thing very clearly. People expected trouble, and they planned to stay a while. That gets even wilder when you bring in the Younger Dryas impact theory. The idea is that around 11,800 years ago, a comet or asteroid strike may have kicked off a brutal global reset. And if survivors had that kind of catastrophe in living memory or cultural memory, suddenly giant underground shelter complexes stop sounding like overkill and start sounding like common sense. I can't prove that link, but I get why people are fascinated by it, because it turns ancient engineering into a human survival story instead of just a tourist site with good acoustics. Then you get Tim Robbins talking about the movie industry in a way that is honestly pretty brutal. He says he was offered projects where he'd play the head of the CIA or FIFA, or be involved in a Chilean mining disaster movie, and the punchline is that the very institutions being depicted were helping fund the projects. So now, the powerful don't just influence the story, they finance their own flattering biopic before anybody else can get there first. That is oligarchic cinema in one sentence. He also turned down a lucrative comedy because it clashed with his values, which is the least flashy story here and maybe the most impressive one. Robbins also talked about speaking out against the Iraq War back in 2003, when doing that publicly was absolutely not the safe play. He challenged the WMD narrative, got hammered for it, lost a Hall of Fame appearance, and got turned into a PR problem for having eyes and a memory. And now, 2 decades later, the war is broadly recognized as baseless. It's one of those reminders that history eventually catches up, but it does not reimburse you for getting it right on time. His broader argument is that the same manipulation tactics keep repeating. On COVID, he pointed to ivermectin getting flattened into the phrase horse dewormer, even though it has WHO-approved human uses, and to fabricated images like fake gunshot ER-line stories being pushed to stir panic. Whatever your personal view on the drug debate, that label first, nuance never style of coverage did real damage to trust. Roman says governments and power centers use fake accounts, bots, and coordinated outrage to keep people fighting each other, and honestly, that doesn't sound futuristic anymore. It sounds like opening your phone. One of his more grounded points is about the loss of water cooler conversation during the pandemic. When people stopped having random chats at work, they also lost those accidental moments where somebody from a different tribe says one surprising thing and your worldview gets dented a little. Instead, we got algorithmic sorting, which means your feed became your neighborhood, your church, your debate club, and your screaming uncle all at once. That is a terrible design for a society. The most unexpectedly great story here is Robbins' non-profit prison improv program. They run workshops in 18 California prisons, and the goal is to teach inmates to answer anger with a different emotional move. He says it has helped reduce gang-related violence, and the examples are wild in the best way. You pair rival gang members in scenes where they're grieving together at a fictional grave, and suddenly people who are supposed to hate each other have to inhabit the same emotional reality. That is either theatre magic or proof that humans are a lot less fixed than we pretend. Robbins is also deeply worried about AI coming for screenwriters, and fair enough. He says, current tools can spit out full scripts in minutes by blending the styles of directors and writers, while unions still haven't locked in a hard ban on AI-generated content. Which means studios see a shortcut, and creators see their compensation and authorship drifting into a blender. That anxiety connects neatly with his love of vinyl, cassettes, and reel-to-reel. For him, analog keeps the human error, the tactile part, the feeling that an actual person touched this thing before it reached you. And honestly, a record store clerk with opinions probably is still a better recommendation engine than whatever app is trying to infer your soul from 3 playlists. Finally, Robbins goes all the way into spiritual experience. He talks about ayahuasca visions, communications after his mother's death, and protective dreams that he takes seriously as real encounters. You don't have to sign every line of that testimony to get his larger point, which is that people live by experiences that aren't easily measurable, and dismissing them too fast can miss something important about how humans actually make meaning. That's it for Only Joe. If a chicken leads you to an underground city, maybe hear it out. See you next time. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.